The tag for this video is FE username input handler. Next up, we need to create our event handler, and the event handler is going to be saved into this onInput event. And whenever an input event occurs on our field, we're going to be calling this event handler here. We're going to hop into our prelude. So let's go and open up our main.rs. And if we go down to our prelude, we're going to pub use create util async handler and sync handler. We need these async and sync handler macros in order to make copies for us automatically. Whenever we create handlers, we need to make copies of all of our hooks, and that takes care of making the copies for us and reduces the lines of code that we need to write. Let's hop back to our register page. We'll scroll down. So we're down here in register, and we need to make an onInput event. So we're working with the username. So we'll just call it username onInput. We're going to use the sync handler macro. So the main difference between the sync handler and the async one is the sync handler will do everything within the web page itself, and we'll use the async handler when we need to reach out to other servers. So since we have a username and the user's just typing in the field, everything's handled within the browser, so we can use the sync handler since there's no request going out to other servers. If we take a look at our page state, we know that the page state is a hook. It's the useRef hook, and we need to make a copy of that and put it into the username input. So we're going to start our macro off with square braces, and we'll have the page state, and that's going to automatically copy the page state into the handler. And remember, with all of our hooks, all of them are pointers, and they're all pointing into something into the scope. So even though we're copying the page state, we're actually just copying a pointer. So we're not making a completely new state. Next, we're going to create a move closure. So we're going to move the data in, have a form event, and then we're going to have a block. Within this block, we're going to access page state. We're going to call the .withMute function. And that's going to get a mutable reference to the page state, which will allow us to change it. We then access the state, and we can make any updates that we need. We're going to access the username field. We're going to set the value to whatever value the user types. To get that value, we use EV to access the form event, and then we get the username, or we get the value, and then we just clone it. So on our form event, we have a value field, and that value is going to be whatever the input field happens to have in the HTML document. So if we type in ABC, then the value here is going to be ABC. We then clone whatever that value is, and we set it into the username, which is part of the state. So if we scroll up, we'll see that our page state here is a string for the username. So the username has some state and it's a string. So we're going to get a copy of a string into our page state. And since we're using hooks, whenever we call that onInput function, anything else that also happens to be looking at this specific hook is going to get updated. So now that we've created our input handler, we can create our input element. So we'll go down here into the form. I'm going to split the view really quick. So we're going to create a username input. If we take a look here on the right, we can see that our username input requires a scope, and this is provided automatically by the RSX macro. We also need state, which is going to be some use state. Remember that we have some state saved in our page state up here. So we're going to be copying this hook, and we're going to be placing it into this username input here. And then we also need our onInput event handler, which we just created over here. So that's our username onInput event handler. So we're going to create our username input. We're going to provide some state. I'm going to close this. So we're going to access the page state .with. .with is like with mute, except it's read-only. So we're going to get a read-only copy of the state. So we're going to access the state. We're going to access the username field, and then we're going to clone it. So we're cloning the hook into the user input. And then we're going to set the onInput event handler to our username onInput. We'll add a comma at the end, save it. We also need to include the create prelude. So we're going to use create prelude. That has our macros imported there. And that should fix the error that we had down here on the sync handler. So let's hop back to the terminal and rerun the program and see what our input looks like. So we'll just serve-frontend. You can keep this running and it should automatically update your page. If not, you can just end the program with Control-C and try running it again. Let's hop into the browser. We'll do a refresh. And there's our username input. And we can just type in anything we want. And we don't have any errors or anything on the console. And so there we go. Now our username input is working properly. That'll do it for the username input. Now we can move on to the password input, which we'll be doing in the next video.